Reading from chapter 4, the appearance of Sri Narada, text 1. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Text 1. Vyasa uvacha iti pruvanam samstuya muninam dirga satrinam vridhakulapati sutam bhavracha shonako bravit.
Vyasadeva said, on hearing Sutta Goswami speak thus, Saunaka Muni, who was the elderly, learned leader of all the rishis engaged in that prolonged sacrificial ceremony, congratulated Sutta Goswami by addressing him as follows.
Text 2. Shonaka uvacha Sutta Sutta Mahabhaga Vadano Vadatam Vara Katham Bhagavatim Punyam Yad Aha Bhagavan Chukaha.
Sonaka said, O Sutta Goswami, you are the most fortunate and respected of all those who can speak and recite. Please relate the pious message of Srimad Bhagavatam, which was spoken by the great and powerful sage Sukadev Goswami.
Text 3. Kasmin yuge pravateyam stane va kena hutana kutas sanchodita Krishna kritavan samhitam munihi.
In what period and at what place was this first begun? And why was this taken up? From where did Krishna Dvaipayana Vyasa, the great sage, get the inspiration to compile this literature?
Text 4. Tasya putra mahayogi samadrin nirvikalpakaha ekantamatir unidro guru mutta iveyate.
His Vyasadeva's son was a great devotee and equibalanced monist whose mind was always concentrated in monism. He was transcendental to mundane activities, but being unexposed, he appeared like an ignorant person.
Text 5. Dritva nuyantam rishim atmajam api anagnam devyo hi riya paridadu nas satyasha chitram tatvikshaya prachati manau jagadustavasti stripum vidanatu sutasya viviktatishte.
While Sri Vyasadeva was following his son, beautiful young damsels who were bathing naked covered their bodies with cloth, although Sri Vyasadeva himself was not naked. But they had not done so when his son had passed. The sage inquired about this, and the young ladies replied that his son was purified and when looking at them made no distinction between male and female. But the sage made such distinctions.
Text 6. Katham alakshita paurye sampratta kuru changalam lan unmata mukha jadavad vicharan gaja saha vaye.
How was he, Srila Sukadev, the son of Vyas, recognized by the citizens when he entered the city of Hastinapur, now New Delhi, after wandering in the provinces of Kuru and Changala, appearing like a madman, dumb and retarded?
Text 7. Katham va pandave yashya rajarshe munina saha samvadaha samabhuttata yatresha satvati shrutihi.
How did it so happen that King Parikshit met this great sage, making it possible for this great transcendental essence of the Vedas, Bhagavatam, to be sung to him?
Text 8. Sago dohana matram hi griheshu grihe medinam avekshate mahabhagas tirthi kurvam stad ashramam.
He, Sukhdev Goswami, was accustomed to stay at the door of a householder only long enough for a cow to be milked. And he did this just to sanctify the residence.
Text 9. Abhimanyu sutam suta prahur bhagavato tat mamam stasya janma mahasharyam karmani cha grinihinaha.
It is said that Maharaj Parikshit is a great first-class devotee of the Lord, and that his birth and activities are all wonderful. Please tell us about him.
Text 10. Sa samvrata kashyava hetuhu pandunam mana vrittanaha prayopavishto gangayam anadrityadiratshiyam.
He was a great emperor and possessed all the opulences of his acquired kingdom. He was so exalted that he was increasing the prestige of the Pandu dynasty. Why did he give up everything to sit down on the bank of Ganges and fast until death?
Text 11. Namanti yat pada niketam atmanaha Sivaya haniya danani sutravaha katham saviraha shriyam angutushyacham yuvasatotshatam aho saha shubhihi.
He was a great emperor that all his enemies would come and bow down at his feet and surrender all their wealth for their own benefit. He was full of youth and strength, and he possessed kingly opulences that were difficult to give up. Why did he want to give up everything, including his life?
Text 12. Shivaya lokasya bhavaya bhutaye ya uttama shloka parayana janaha jivanti natmartham asau parashrayam mumocho nirvedya kuta kalevaram.
Those who are devoted to the cause of the personality of Godhead live only for the welfare, development, and happiness of others. They do not live for any selfish interest. So even though the emperor Parikshit was free from all attachment to worldly possessions, how could he give up his mortal body, which was the shelter for others?
Text 13. Tat sarvam na samachakshva prishto yat iha kinchana manye tvam vishaye vacham snakam anyatra chandasata.
We know that you are expert in the meaning of all subjects, except some portions of the Vedas, and thus you can clearly explain the answers to all the questions we have just put to you.
Text 14. Sutta uvacha dvapare samanu prapte tritiye yuga paryaye jataha parasharat yogi vasavyam kalaya hare.
Sutta Goswami said, when the second millennium overlapped the third, the great sage Vyasadeva was born to Parasara in the womb of Satyavati, the daughter of Vasu.
Text 15. Sakadachita sarva shvatyam upasprishya jalam suchihi vivikta ekam asina udite ravi mandale.
Once upon a time, he, Vyasadeva, as the sun rose, took his morning ablution in the waters of the Saraswati and sat alone to concentrate.
Text 16. Paravarajnasa rashihi kale na vyaktam ramhasa yuga dharmam vyatikaram praptam bhuvi yuge yuge.
The great sage Vyasadeva saw anomalies in the duties of the millennium. This happens on the earth in different ages due to the unforeseen force of time.
Hare Krishna. Apologies for any mistakes. Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Hema Mataji and Salish Prabhu. That was very nice. Very nice recitation. Thank you. So let me just get everything correct. So welcome, dear devotees, to tonight's chat session. I'm not sure if anyone's joining us for the first time, but if you are, warm welcome to you. We gather every night from 7:45 to 8:45 to read, discuss, and relish Srimad Bhagavatam. We started with the first canto. We're now in chapter 4 of the first canto, the appearance of Sri Narada. And today we will be discussing text number 4. Before we start our recitation, we recite the Mangala Charanam prayers to invoke auspiciousness and prepare our consciousness for the sacred activity that we're now going to be engaged in. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmalitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurve Namaha. Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yata Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatham Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutan Harijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastate Tapta Kanchana Gorange Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sutidevi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Turubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shrivashadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prashtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Vastacha Deshatarine. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. So text number 4. Tasya putro mahayogi samadrin nirvikalpakaha ekhanta matir anidro gudho mudha ive yate. Word for word synonyms. Tasya, his, putra, son, mahayogi, a great devotee, samadrik, equibalanced, nirvikalpakaha, absolute monist, ekantamati, fixed in monism or oneness of mind, unidraha, surpassed nescience, gudha, not exposed, mudha, stunted, eva, like, iyate, appears like. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. His Vyasadev's son was a great devotee, an equibalanced monist whose mind was always concentrated in monism. He was transcendental to mundane activities, but being unexposed, he appeared like an ignorant person. Purport. Srila Shukadev Goswami was a liberated soul, and thus he remained always alert not to be trapped by the illusory energy. In the Bhagavad Gita, this alertness is very lucidly explained. The liberated soul and the conditioned soul have different engagements. The liberated soul is always engaged in the progressive path of spiritual attainment, which is something like a dream for the conditioned soul. The conditioned soul cannot imagine the actual engagements of the liberated soul. While the conditioned soul thus dreams about spiritual engagements, the liberated soul is awake. Similarly, the engagement of a conditioned soul appears to be a dream for the liberated soul. A conditioned soul and a liberated soul may apparently be on the same platform, but factually they are differently engaged. And their attention is always alert, either in sense gratification or in self-realization. The conditioned soul is absorbed in matter, whereas the liberated soul is completely indifferent to matter. This indifference is explained as follows. So let me share my screen. So this is a beautiful section of Srimad Bhagavatam. I find it very interesting and appealing. It starts off, this whole section is Shonaka's Rishis to Sutta Goswami. He asks further questions. And essentially, the questions are about the history of the Bhagavatam. And it starts off by asking questions about the speaker of the Bhagavatam, Sri Shukadev Goswami. And thereafter, he asks questions about the listener about the Bhagavatam, which is Maharaj Parikshit. All of this is taking place from text number 1 to 13. So, Shaunaka Rishi's questions to Sutta Goswami, inquiring about the history of the Bhagavatam, specifically inquiring about the nature and the personality of Shukadev Goswami, and thereafter the nature and the personality of Maharaj Parikshit. So in this verse, description of Shukadev Goswami is being related. Now this is very important and relevant for us. And it makes a big difference about how we receive Srimad Bhagavatam. One person may just have some vague idea about who Shukadev Goswami is. That person will hear, receive, and have a certain level of faith on the words of Shukadev Goswami. There may be another person who has developed love and attraction for Shukadev Goswami. And because of that love and attraction, every word that Shukadeva Goswami speaks, the devotee, that listener tries to absorb it with keen attention, with deep faith and a love for Shukadeva Goswami. That makes a huge difference to how we receive Srimad Bhagavatam. The faith in which we receive the Srimad Bhagavatam, and the desire and the eagerness by which we receive. So these verses that we'll be studying and explaining about the history, the character, and the personality of Sri Shukadeva Goswami, we should pay particular attention. We should try to understand and absorb, because it will all lead to us to develop a certain attraction for Sri Shukadeva Goswami, who is a great personality. In this verse, there's certain qualities of Sri Shukadeva Goswami is being discussed. You all hearing me? Sometimes I'll drop a connection. I don't know if you're still there. Everyone's here still?
Yes,
Prabhuji. Yeah.
Prabhuji.
Okay, fantastic. So there are many wonderful qualities we can discuss and relish, but we'll just touch on some of them. So some of the qualities here was, firstly, he was a great devotee. Secondly, an equibalanced monist. Now this is like a paradox. This is like almost a confusion. Whose mind was always concentrated in monism. Now, dear devotees, we've been studying Bhagavad Gita. We've been studying Srimad Bhagavatam. And we know a devotee and a monist have quite different personalities. But here we see an equibalanced monist whose mind is always concentrated in monism, being described as a great devotee. Very interesting, isn't it? How shall we understand this? Okay, we'll talk about it. The next quality here, he was transcendental to mundane activities. But being unexposed, he appeared like an ignorant person. Again, it is quite interesting. Srila Prabhupada's choice of words, very, very interesting. And this is how the Bhagavatam comes alive. Every sentence we read, we should analyze, we should meditate on it, because we know Shukadeva Goswami was completely exposed. He was walking around naked, with not a single piece of clothing, because he was a completely transcendental personality. And Prabhupada says, but he was unexposed. So, yeah, that is there. Let's discuss, and even the purport is just fantastic. There is one particular quality of Srila Shukadeva Goswami that Srila Prabhupada focuses on in this purport. And that is the quality that he was a liberated person. And in the purport, Srila Prabhupada contrasts the personality, a liberated personality, with a conditioned personality. Again, this is very important and relevant for us in our Krishna consciousness. If we want to attain the supreme goal, we want to take instruction, and we want to associate with liberated persons, not conditioned persons. But we need to know who's a liberated person. How do we recognize a liberated person? Then only we'll be able to choose. Once Srila Prabhupada was having a conversation with an Indian gentleman. And this Indian gentleman was saying to Srila Prabhupada, Swamiji, India is the land of the Mahatmas, the great souls. But yet we see so much of problems and conflict in India. How do we reconcile this? And Prabhupada said something very interesting. Prabhupada said, that is the problem. In India, people do not know who a Mahatma is. And they accept many Duratmas to be Mahatmas, and these Duratmas cause confusion. And actually, this is fact. If you go to India, at any one point in time, you can meet thousands and thousands of people claiming to be avatars. Thousands of people claiming to be liberated souls, attracting numbers, hundreds and thousands of followers. That's a cause for great difficulty. So we need to know who is a Mahatma, who a Mahatma is, who a liberated personality is. And if we want to attain success, we actually, a condition Prabhupada used to say, when the blind lead the blind, they all fall into a ditch. So if we surrender and we listen and we take instruction from a condition, so we will end up in a ditch. Meaning, we will not come out of material existence. So here, in the Bhagavatam, the speaker of the Bhagavatam is being made very clear here. Sri Shukadev Goswami is a liberated person. Today I know there's many people, even devotees, very attracted to reading many, many books by self-help gurus. Many books, self-help gurus, quoting even on Facebook page. Instead of quoting the liberated souls from Bhagavatam, many of them quote these self-help gurus. The sayings are nice, they're nice, but they are still under the modes of three nature. Such persons are still under the control of the modes of three nature, three modes of nature. And thus, whatever they will say will always have some fault, will always have some flaw, and cannot really elevate our consciousness to the highest level. But the liberated souls, every word we hear from them will uplift us. So this is Sri Shukadev Goswami. He's described here as a Mahayogi, a great devotee. He was about 16 years old, and he appeared, as the verse says, almost ignorant. In Vedic culture, even in modern culture, we say never judge a book by its cover. In Vedic culture, it teaches us not to judge, but we can know the quality of a person when they speak. When they open their mouth, when they speak, we will know what's the nature. Because when the great devotees speak, are full of bhava, full of ecstatic symptoms, love for the Lord. And when they speak, that is what comes out. That is what comes out. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada makes some interesting statements here. He says, while the conditioned soul does dreams about spiritual engagements, the liberated soul is awake. That reminds us of what verse from the Bhagavad Gita? Anyone knows? Verse 269. Lord Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Ya nisha sarva bhutanam tasyam jagarti samyami yasyam jagrati bhutani sa nisha pashyato munehe. What is night for all beings is the time of awakening for the self-controlled. And the time of awakening for all beings is night for the introspective sage. So one devotee once asked Srila Prabhupada, can you explain this verse? What does it mean? And Srila Prabhupada gave a very interesting response. He said, when they see us, they laugh. And when we see them, we laugh. Meaning, when they materialist, the conditioned soul hears that the devotee is getting up at 3:30 in the morning, going to Mangal Arati at 4:30, they think these people are completely nuts. This is a time to sleep, be deep in Nidra Loka, but they are getting up. And us, sometimes it happens, you know, when you're in the temple, especially when you go to Soho Street Temple, devotees will be going for Mangal Arati, and that time the party goers are still raving. They are still raving. So this is the distinction made between the conditioned souls and the liberated souls. This is a beautiful verse from the Bhagavatam, 3rd canto, chapter 25, text number 20. And Prasangam ajaram pasham atmana kavayo vidu saeva sadhu shukrito mokshadwaram apavritam. Every learned man knows very well that attachment for the material is the greatest entanglement of the spirit soul. But that same attachment, when applied to self-realized devotees, opens the door for liberation. This verse is relevant to what we're discussing today, because if we are somehow or the other able to develop some attachment to the Lord's self-realized devotees, the liberated souls, it says for us, the door for spiritual perfection is wide open. There's another verse from the 5th canto, 5th chapter, 2nd verse. Many of y'all may recognize this verse because it was quite often quoted by Srila Prabhupada. Mahat sevam dwaram ahor vimuktes tamo dwaram yoshitam sangi sangam mahantas tisama chitaha prasanta viman yavaha surida sadhavo ye. One can attain are impersonalists and devotees. Dear devotees, can you hear me? I'm getting some errors in my computer saying my connection is unstable. Are you able to hear me still?
Yes, I can hear you now, but I lost for a few seconds.
Okay, so I'll read the translation again. One can attain the path of liberation from material bondage only by rendering service to highly advanced spiritual personalities. These personalities are impersonalists and devotees. Whether one wants to merge into the Lord's existence or wants to associate with the personality of Godhead, one should render service to the Mahatmas. For those who are not interested in such activities or associate with people fond of women and sex, the path to hell is wide open. The Mahatmas are equipoised. They do not see any difference between one living entity and another. They are very peaceful and fully engaged in devotional service. They are devoid of anger, and they work for the benefit of everyone. They do not behave in any abominable way. Such people are known as Mahatmas. So this verse here is giving us again the qualifications of a liberated personality. The Mahatmas, the great devotees. And interestingly enough, this verse categorizes both the devotees and the impersonalists as Mahatmas. Now, I'll just read for you the particular purport of this verse. I hope I got it. Okay, that's another one. Okay, maybe I'll just park that for now. But I want to come back to what the interesting point I raised previously, the question I raised, that Shukadev Goswami is being described in this verse as a great devotee and an equipoised monist whose mind was always concentrated in monism. Now, dear devotee, what's going on here? How do we understand this apparent contradiction? Would anyone like to share their realizations and thoughts? Don't feel shy. Okay. So Shukadev Goswami, his primary position, without any doubt, is he's a great devotee. And we all know that his eternal, his Swarup Siddhi, his eternal constitutional position, that he is a very dear parrot of Srimati Radharani in the spiritual world. Shuka. That's why he got the name Shukadev Goswami. Now, I don't want to jump the gun here, but we will study later on in this chapter about the birth of Shukadev Goswami and so on. And Prabhupada's choice of words, an equibalanced monist, gives us some inclination about what's going on here. What does it mean, an equibalanced monist? And devotees, I want to also make the distinction between a monist and a Mayavadi. There's a big difference between a monist who believes in the Brahman aspect of the Lord and a Mayavadi. A monist is not offensive to the Lord. It is only that they are understanding, as we understand, we've read in Srimad Bhagavatam, Brahmeti, Paramapeti, Bhagavaniti, Labhyate. That there are three levels of understanding: Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. So there are some devotees or some Mahatmas, great souls, that they've only risen to the point of understanding the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his Brahman form. But they are not offenders. The Mayavadis are offenders. Why are they offenders? Because they consider the body of the Lord to be material. The Mayavadis, they consider Lord Krishna's body, Lord Ram's body, and so on, to be material. And they consider themselves to be equal. that Krishna is here, I am here. I am the same as Krishna. One day, when I merge into the Brahman, I'll be equal to Krishna. These are Mayavadis. These are not the monists that are being spoken about here. So coming back to the point, sometimes certain devotees, great devotees, they appear in a certain way for certain pastimes, like in the pastimes of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. He was a Mayavadi, an impersonalist. He played a role in the Lord's pastimes simply so that the Lord could defeat the Mayavadi philosophy. Balva Mangala Thakur, who is a liberated soul, he also acted like a gross materialist. So sometimes the Lord's devotees, they appear in a certain way prior to establishing their real position. And again, I don't want to jump the gun, because when we read the next verses, this particular point will become more and more clear. But the point being, Shukadev Goswami's position is that he is a great devotee. For a point in time when he ran away from home and they had to search for him, he portrayed himself almost as a monist. But that's just external, not the real position. Now, in the Bhakti tradition, what does it mean to be a liberated person? Put very simply, how are we doing for time now? Plus 8. Okay, I'll paraphrase what I wanted to say. I wanted to read some statements from Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, but I always like to leave time for us to discuss and give the attendees the opportunity to also speak and share their realizations. So we know that there are various stages from the Shraddha to Prem. We start off with Shraddha, faith. Then it's Sadhu Sangha, we associate with devotees. Then we want to take it seriously. It's Bhajana Kriya. That means we practice bhajan, we take initiation. Then it's Anartha Nivriti, removing all the unwanted things in the heart. Then Nishta, we become fixed. Then we develop taste, ruchi. And then we develop attachment, Ashakti. And then from Ashakti, we develop ecstatic love for Krishna. That's called Bhava Bhakti. And then Prema Bhakti, full, just a more condensed form of Bhava Bhakti. These are the stages in the development, in the process of Bhakti. So there's a stage called Bhava Bhakti. Bhava Bhakti is the stage where one becomes liberated. At that stage, one is not considered to be living in a material body anymore. So one can be liberated even while being in this body. And as I explained last time, at the stage of Bhava Bhakti, the devotee gets bestowed by Lord Krishna with the chit potency, the knowledge potency, and the ladini potency, the pleasure potency. And Sudha Sattva Visheshatma. That's the definition for one's body becomes completely saturated with the Shuddha Sattva. And one's body is no longer material. Prabhupada used to give the very simple analogy. If we take a metal rod, that rod, it is made of metal. But if we take that metal rod and we hold it in fire for some time, we will notice that that metal rod starts to become red hot. And it emits light and it emits heat. and it ceases to be a metal rod anymore. It becomes fire by holding it to fire. So in the same way, when the devotee of the Lord reaches the stage of bhava bhakti, their body becomes completely infused with the chit and ladini potency of the Lord. And that devotee is considered to be completely on the liberated platform. Completely on the liberated platform. And that devotee is on the spiritual platform. So in the Bhakti tradition, even while living in the body, one can be a liberated soul. So Shukadev Goswami was one such liberated soul. And everything that Shukadev Goswami speaks in the Bhagavatam is pure nectar. Not only pure nectar, it's nigama kalpataro galitam phalam shukamukad amrita drava samyutam pibata bhagavatam rasamayalam muhurhahu bhuvi bhavukaha rasika bhuvi bhavukaha. That this Srimad Bhagavatam is already very relishable, but having been tasted by the lips, coming from the lips of Shukadev Goswami, it's become more relishable. That is, if you remember the third verse we studied in the first canto. Just like in India, it is said, if a mango fruit is touched by the beak of a parrot, that fruit becomes even more tasty. So this Srimad Bhagavatam, having been touched or having emanated from the lips of Sri Shukadev Goswami, this Bhagavatam has become even more sweet, even more relishable. Rasamayalam, very tasty, very relishable. So we are very fortunate that we are studying this transcendental literature, the greatest of all literatures, that is coming from the lips of Sri Shukadev Goswami. So there are many other points we can talk about, but I think probably it's appropriate I stop here and take any questions or comments or reflections that anyone has.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Mataji.
Chandra, Pranam, Prabhu. Can you explain, because I didn't understand the monist realization of Krishna or Supreme Personality of Godhead? I didn't quite understand that.
Okay, maybe let me just see if I can bring up the purport, Mataji, of this one verse where Prabhupada explains it very nicely. So yeah, I'll just share this for now, and then the human body is like a junction. One may either take the path of liberation or take the path leading to hellish condition. How one can take this path is described herein. That's the verse I recited earlier. On the path of liberation, one associates with Mahatmas, and on the path of bondage, one associates with those attached to sense gratification and women. There are two types of Mahatmas, the impersonalist and the devotee. Although the ultimate goal is different, meaning the devotee's ultimate goal is Bhagavan, the impersonalist's ultimate goal is impersonal Brahman. The process of emancipation is almost the same. Both want eternal happiness. One seeks happiness in impersonal Brahman, and the other seeks happiness in the association of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As described in the first verse, Brahma Sokyam. Sokyam. Brahma means spiritual, eternal. So what I was explaining to about Sri Shukadev Goswami, this verse that we studied today explains him simultaneously as both as a great devotee and a monist, which seems to be contradictory in one sense. But just from what I read now, we can understand it's not contrary. As Prabhupada says here, the process of emancipation is almost the same. And in Shukadev Goswami's case, his foremost position is his great devotee. But there was a time when he portrayed himself as an impersonalist, as a monist.
Sorry, Prabhu. Are they like Brahmavadi?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hare Krishna.
Right.
Yeah.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Any other questions? Hare Krishna.
Prabhupada. Thank you for a very, very wonderful class, Prabhuji. I heard from His Holiness Radhanath Swami in a lecture once that the way I think that we should try and understand this verse is that Sukadeva Goswami started. He took the role of a monist in order to bring out the sweetness of bhakti. And then when he heard those two verses, he then converted to becoming a Vaishnava. So he doesn't continue to be a monist, as it were. And he's not a monist at the same time as being a Vaishnava, because those are contradictory, as you rightly say. So is that the right understanding, Prabhuji, that we should, although the verse refers to him as both, but actually he is a past tense was monist, present tense is Vaishnava?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. As the point I was trying to make in when I spoke on this, is that they may portray a position, and you draw the very interesting point, to enhance the beauty and the relishable nature of bhakti. He portrayed the position of a monist because it's dry, and his real nature is a devotee, But sometimes, like sometimes Prabhupada used to say his disciples, some of them were eternal associates of Lord Chaitanya, who took birth in America. And originally they may have been doing so many things, they were hippies or what. But later, the real nature, the truth manifested itself. So there's some purpose there. Glorify Srila Prabhupada's preaching. Many connection's not very good. Can you hear me?
You cut out there for a little while, Prabhuji.
Oh, okay. My connection seems to be a bit unstable at the moment.
The other interesting thing that I reread again is in the CC Adi Leela, the Lord Nityananda's greatness. When that I can't remember the chapter now, where the glories of Lord Nityananda. There's a purport. It is a marathon purport written by Srila Prabhupada. It's about a 25-page purport, where he's essentially, it's a very, very deep philosophical purport, where he's essentially concentrating on Shankaracharya, monism, and dismantling the whole philosophy. It's a really, really heavyweight purport. It's quite interesting how heavy-handed Prabhupada was with even Shankaracharya and monism as well. So it's quite interesting, isn't it? I mean, just this whole philosophical combination here is quite mind-blowing.
True. Even Advaita Acharya once, he wanted to be chastised by Lord Chaitanya, so he portrayed himself as an impersonalist, and Lord Chaitanya chastised him and he was in bliss. So devotees do that sometimes for a certain Leela, and Shukadeva Goswami did the same. Did you hear that, Prabhu, or I lost you all again?
No, thank you for that,
Okay.
Prabhuji. Thank you for a wonderful class. It was really, really nectarian. Thank you. As
Hare
always.
Krishna. Hare Krishna. Thank you, Salish Prabhu. Anyone else got any comments, reflections, questions? All good?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Accept my humble obeisances, all girls to Prabhupada and Guru Maharaj Prabhuji. Just wanted to comment on wonderful explanation of monism and impersonalist. So I didn't know about that. So thank you very much for that. and wonderful class. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sundari Mataji. Nice to hear you again.
Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, thank you very much, dear devotees, for your... Jolly Mataji, did you want to add anything?
Well, it might be a cheeky statement. I just think maybe you have been pecked on the tongue by a parrot when you were a baby, because you tell the sweetest stories. From you just captures everybody's attention. Thank you.
Thank
Haribol.
you. Hare Krishna.
Haribol.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, I agree with that, Mataji. I do like listening to you. Yeah, I can focus when you're talking about it,
Yeah.
which is very good. Thank you very much, Prabhuji.
Thank you for encouraging me. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhuvyevacha patitanam Anantakoti Vaishnavrinda ki jai, Prabhupada ki jai, Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki jai, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Hare
Thank you, Prabhuji. Thank you, Hare
Hare
Krishna.
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 Thank you.